Allowance hobbies. Not unless the kids are getting paid via PayPal, Venmo, or even just straight putting those in their Robux. Alright, now that I got that bit out of the way, and now that two of the big three console manufacturers are kind of on fire right now, business wise, I thought I would do a quick look at a title that involves them both, as this is the most prominent of the essential PS Plus drops for this month. And yes, I have some modding situation alongside the higher up stock moves. So, here are my thoughts on the 2023 version of Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, specifically the story campaign, in which, as I mentioned before, I'm not the biggest COD fan in the world, and there have been some additions better than others. Like, it's not the worst one I've ever played. I'd since Infinite Warfare and Black Ops 7 exists, but it is far from the best. I can definitely agree with that for the fan base, so let's get started. First, I'm gonna get the positives out of the way, which usually helps make the critiques go down a bit easier for a game I do not particularly care for. Or the presentation is for the most part pretty solid. I did had to figure out the way they worded it, but I could definitely say in performance mode, it's everything looks smooth enough, runs smooth for the most part, including like the big explosive action sequences that have become like a serious hallmark. Or I think it tends to work best when it's got the grounded paramilitary heavy shooting with just the right amount of action with bombast added. And gameplay wise, it definitely he does function at least. It's like each weapon and class feels distinctive, from sidearms to shotguns, guns to SMGs, and incendiary weapons as well. Oh, and also don't mind the idea of like how some kind of special abilities, things like one can has a drone that can scope out enemies and tag them, so it's easier to take them down, which is particularly useful for certain missions and where, and also figure out their vantage points. Soundscape it also is not bad either. Not really any point to making an FPS like this if all your weapons sound like something I got a Dollar Tree a long time ago. And now that, and I will say that even though the story campaign itself is not very good, I will say this is at least short. So, oh, whether or not you actually complete all 5.5 hours of it, which is short by COD campaign standards, and its most story components tend to be at least 6 or 7 hours at minimum. Um, but either way, it's not going to ruin your whole weekend if it is as your inclination, because based on what I'm about to tell you, I don't really have any real desire to dip into multiplayer this time around, and those of you who are familiar with this title likely know why. Let's get even in a day and age where a game gets accused of being a glorified high list price DLC pack every other week, this is one example where I think the detractors you'll use that similarly have a solid case, because the evidence is pretty open, such as the case with the whole annual release cycle, which is the only franchise thing that still does that apart from sports titles. titles, and I'd be happy if they stopped being and maybe took the time they needed to make the games better. Or, and the front end and is functionally the same one from Modern Warfare 2 2022 with different number on it, same deal with installation, and I told my system to install the story campaign first, and somehow the wires got crossed when I put it in sleep mode. The a lot of the maps, while some of them um do at least function, and for the most part I just kind of have said budget on the deep cover mission, which was the last one, the story campaign. So I'll come back to it later, and I also mentioned again in this video. Oh, it's also been said that they've kind of been repurposed from previous installments with some of the open and zone home maps basically being repurposed from the Battle Royale Warzone spin-off title, and I can honestly tell. I did not play the most amount of Warzone ever, but I've definitely played enough to recognize certain maps, and what I was doing on there. I mean, so at the very least, I knew how to navigate them, how to find cover, as well as for things like the payloads, those secrets, and other just need to complete before we got out of there. And and even though oh I don't really expect at the biggest or best character stories from this franchise, I I don't even bother really learning the names of the characters. I was gonna play most of the time, especially since for people who do dive in multiplayer, most likely going to see a people with some variation of Thrill Ho or John Wick 67 having been swearing up a storm. It's probably a fraction of your age as well, man. And even though on a basic level, the story of trying to stop up an experimental chemical weapon and from being unleashed around the world is fine, it definitely does start to seem a bit familiar. I know that this franchise gets this accusation a lot, uh, but again, this is one instance where there's definitely still a case be made with that argument this time around, and especially since the previous Modern Warfare 3, all the way back in 2011, so 15 years ago, there's my yet another indicator of pop culture age right there. There are some moments, admittedly, that are reaching for it. I mean, I still maintain the now infamous No Russian and sequence was in the previous titles were like lightning in a bottle, not something going to easily recreate. Not that it hasn't stopped Activision and subsidiaries from trying. I mean, I know who, and also I will acknowledge that even with the whole action movie flair that's become a bait into the fabric of the franchise, so woven into the fabric of the franchise, and so much bait in the material. Oh, Daniel Olson for his 40 Idea series also brought this up in one of his essays. Is that it's become less about trying to do a whole cinematic shooter experience of itself, and it's more like, what if this action movie scene was playable, and I can get that vibe a lot of this story, especially like the opening mission where we're busting someone out of prison, and it's basically like if you made an FPS out of the opening Prison Break Mission Possible Ghost Protocol, or the open Fire Zone missions I mentioned, and they're paralleling, especially like the Marion Star rescue and Captain America Winter Soldier, with again another instance of trying to stop this pathogen, and but still not really escaping that without unscathed. Again, the open of its sequel, Captain Winter Civil War, like the Logo sequence. It's I definitely why I and others have taken the Clone franchise kind of like the McDonald's of video games, where it's not too bad to have one so often, but it doesn't really leave a much of a memorable impact once you're finished with it. Which is kind of why I'm just doing this quickie now while it's fresh in mind, and I work on my other projects I've got coming for this month. Just so you know, I'm not just watching in Adventure Time and and I'm practicing for the next Splatfest, which is also true, by the way. Though not the worst game to come out of 2023, that is a year where Lord of the Rings Gollum and Skull and Rise of Khans are released after all, to say nothing of outright scams the day before, or this is still among the list of my most disappointing titles that year here for a reason, and where it's gotten to the point where, unless it's egregiously bad, like Black Ops 7 was, because it's not really even worth the same level of vitriol all that it invaded in decades past. I mean, just, I said this before, and I better say it again. I'd rather her that a bad game or other work of fiction be a white hot trash fire than just being boring or mediocre. So that's kind of my reason why I don't see myself talking about anything Wonder Project anytime soon. And with that in mind, I thankfully got my ticket to Odyssey for next week. I'm also working on paying off Splatoon Raiders and getting tickets to Spider-Man as well. And that'll be for now. I'll see you all again very soon. Take care, everyone.